I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is Psychacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is dealing with indirect requests. I gotta admit, this is one of my pet peeves. I'm not a big fan of indirect communication. While I understand that there is a time and a place for suggestion, I'll take direct, straight talk any day of the week. And nowhere does indirect communication seem to cause more trouble than in our romantic relationships. Here's a simple example. You're sitting in your living room, and your partner turns to you and says, "Ooh, it's cold in here." Now, is this simply an observation on the ambient temperature? Or is this an indirect request to turn the heat up? And that's why I personally find indirect communication distasteful. It protects the indirect communicator at the expense of the other party. Why is this? Well, in the first place, if you never make an actual request, you can never be rejected. After all, you're not actually asking for anything. So it protects the indirect communicator from this possible outcome. And in the second place, you retain plausible deniability. So if the other party reads between the lines, assumes the implied request, and denies the implied request, or rankles at the attempted manipulation, then the indirect communicator can argue that there was no request, and why do you always assume I'm asking for something? It's a no-lose situation for the indirect communicator, and potentially a no-win situation for the other party. So it's kind of a selfish way to interact with other people, and it can be very frustrating to deal with. So if this is an issue that's coming up in your relationship, you might have to kind of retrain your partner to be a more direct communicator. And here's the best way I found to do that. If you hear a statement that you perceive to be an indirect request, then your best move is to ask an honest, clarifying question. So, for example, in this case, if your partner says, "Ooh, it's cold in here," you could potentially respond by asking, "Are you asking me to turn the heat on?" The key here is to ensure that this remains an honest question by watching your tone. Because if you come off as sarcastic or irritable, it's probably going to provoke defensiveness. So phrase it as an honest question. "Are you asking me to turn the heat on?" If the tone is correct, that honest question will often prompt the other party to rephrase the initial statement as a direct request, if that was in fact the intention. Like, "Oh yeah, would you please turn on the heat?" And then of course you're free to respond as you like. Though when people make reasonable and polite direct requests of us, we're generally much more amenable to concession. So this strategy is generally good for both parties, and the more we set up win-win communication opportunities with our partner, the better. Give it a shot. It might take some practice. However, asking honest, clarifying questions in response to perceived indirect requests can prompt your partner to be more mindful in asking for what he or she really wants, which is an essential relationship skill. Hope that helps. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, please like, rate, and review this episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please drop a comment below. Finally, if you'd like to schedule a consultation, you can reach me at psychackspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.